Hello there, welcome to KTN Prime. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Linda Ogutu. Our sign language interpreter there at the bottom end of your screen is Meresha Owete. The Kenyan government has now issued an order banning any demonstrations against commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Interior Cabinet Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri and Inspector General of Police Joseph Boynet banned what they called unlawful demonstrations on grounds that the protesters have failed to comply with the law, leading to the loss of lives, injuries, and destruction of property. But in a quick rejoinder, the opposition coalition CORD questioned the laws that the government was using to ban the demonstrations and declared they would now be having the protests twice a week. Chris Thairu reports.
The Jubilee administration has now drawn the line on the opposition protest against the Electoral Commission.
From today, the government prohibits all unlawful demonstrations in the country.
So for us, once that instruction has been issued, we will comply accordingly.
Since the opposition coalition CORD kicked off their weekly anti-IEBC demonstrations in various parts of Kenya, 5 people have lost their lives after allegedly being shot by the police. Many others are still nursing bullet wounds. Property worth millions of shillings have also been destroyed in Nairobi and Kisumu counties. And it is on this backdrop that the government says enough is enough.
Peaceful, unarmed, picketing, demonstrate. But when you see people coming with slings, machetes, stones, that's what somebody is coming for, is prepared for war, prepared for battle. And those are not demonstrations at all.
Constitution does not protect a rioters' assembly. A rioters' assembly is a group of persons who, having peacefully commenced a demonstration, become violent and destroy property.
Although the High Court through Justice Joseph Onguto ruled that CORD leaders and their supporters can stage demonstrations against the IEBC but peacefully, the government argues that it also has a responsibility of protecting the lives and property through the maintenance of law and order.
The Constitutional Court issued an order that protected the rights to peacefully assemble and demonstrate.
Anybody who is going to confront law enforcing security officers, it means you are an enemy of the security people, and you'll be arrested.
But the opposition coalition still remains adamant that the demonstrations are legal and protected under the Constitution, and that the demonstrations will continue. Immediately after the ban by the government, the CORD Secretariat, through the CEO Norman Magaya, issued a statement stating, and I quote, "The right to picket and demonstrate is not a privilege granted by the state, but rather a right guaranteed by the Constitution under Article 37. Hence, CS Nkaiseri has no powers, real or imagined, to purport to prohibit any demonstrations under the new constitutional dispensation." End quote.
It is extremely dangerous for anybody to challenge the government decision. The consequences are grave. The consequences are going to be applied.
The opposition now plans to issue a notification of peaceful demonstrations on Monday and Thursday next week to the police come Wednesday morning. The government has come under harsh criticism for using excessive force to quell the demonstrations, as well as failing to provide security to the demonstrators. Chris Thairu, KTN News.
All right, let's have a conversation about this. So the government has prohibited all unlawful demonstrations in the country. CORD, on the other hand, says this is a right that is guaranteed by the Constitution. So on our big question tonight on KTN Prime, we're asking you, Do you support the government's ban on the so-called unlawful protest? Interior Cabinet Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri making it very clear that this they're doing to protect the lives of Kenyans and indeed property. But then do you support the government's ban on the so-called unlawful protest, putting in mind that it is a right that is guaranteed by the Constitution? Tweeters at KTN News, at KTN Kenya. You can tweet me directly as well at Linda Gutu. And I'll sample your views during this bulletin as we focus on the IEBC demos that have been called by court and the consequences therein. So as the violence and the verbal wars continue over the Kenyan Electoral Commission, two National Assembly committees have decided to hold joint sittings across the country to start collecting public views on electoral reforms and reconstitution of the electoral body. The Justice Committee will tomorrow table the IEBC Amendment Bill 2016 that seeks to reduce the IEBC to 4 members serving on part-time basis. Patrick Amimo has more.
Even as the presidency and the opposition leadership wrestle on the formation of a mediation team that will negotiate and decide the fate of IEBC, the National Assembly's Joint Committees of Justice and Constitutional Implementation have started a parliamentary initiative whose end result will see major electoral reforms and a new look IEBC. Members are aware that the IEBC Act 2011 is obsolete since it was meant to manage the 2013 general elections. The IEBC Amendment Bill 2016 seeks to change the procedure of appointing members of a selection panel that will recruit the chairperson and members of the new electoral body.
The bill seeks to reorganize the procedure for appointment of chairperson and members of the commission by establishing a selection panel that has a membership with equal membership of 2 members, each from the largest and the second largest party or coalition of parties in the National Assembly. And the requirement here is that there must be at least 1 man and 1 woman nominated by both coalitions, and 3 persons competitively recruited by the Public Service Commission. It is not 3 persons, they are actually supposed to be 6 persons and forwarded to the President, who will then nominate 3 persons and forward them to the National Assembly for vetting and approval.
The IEBC Amendment Bill 2016 seeks to reduce the membership of the current commission from 8 members to 4 members. The members appointed to the commission shall serve on part-time basis as opposed to the present arrangement where commissioners serve full-time. The bill also proposes to establish vetting criteria for all senior officers who have served in the commission for more than 2 years to ensure that they are fit and proper to continue holding office. Members will divide themselves into 11 clusters of 9 members each as they go out to collect public views on electoral reforms and new look IEBC. The Joint Committees hopes to compile a report of its findings within a month and present it to the National Assembly for debate.
The members of this committee, both joint committees, will therefore be the key resource persons to get the views of Kenyans and bring them on board for further consideration.
The Constitution has vested in us a duty, a responsibility to discuss, to deliberate, to resolve issues of concern to the people. Dialogue is important, and I want to put it on record without any fear of contradiction, and I can repeat this anyway, Mr. Chairman, that any initiative intended to unlock this impasse, any initiative that can bring Kenyans together to discuss this matter with the intention of finding a lasting solution must be supported.
This is a parliamentary initiative. What my president or my party leader thinks, I don't think is what should tie my mind as they go out to speak to the public or as they come to speak to us.
The reason why we're going to Kisumu, the reason why we're going to Mombasa is how do we constitute the new IEBC commission?
Everything we have been doing in the streets actually is side issues. They will not give us a solution. And the country wants a solution. And
we are not here to replace IEBC. You have correctly pointed out that we have an amendment bill. And that's what we are seeking to do. That's our mandate at the moment. And if there is a petition that comes to us for the removal of IEBC, then we will be seized with that matter.
Yes. But some members expressed fears headline positions from the presidency and the opposition leadership might interfere with their plans to conduct public hearings on electoral reforms across the country. Meanwhile, the opposition called held a parliamentary group meeting where members resolved not to support the parliamentary initiative.
The committee of Justice and Legal Affairs in the National Assembly that has begun a process, as it were, to resolve the crisis in IEBC is a smokescreen. It is not an initiative being made in good faith, and we have given instructions to our members in that committee to withdraw from that committee.
Members of the National Assembly's joint committees will meet Thursday to come up with a clear timetable on countrywide visits to discuss ways of ending deadlock on electoral reforms. Patrick Amimo, KTN News.
So as we still focus on the IEBC protests, a good number of you will remember conversation that has been taking place, especially on social media, on a young baby that was shot in Kisumu. We'll give you details of who he is and his story in a few minutes. But for now, let's stay with that Chepkonga-led committee and that Amendment Bill 2016 and some of the proposals that are being proposed by that Chepkonga-led committee. So they're proposing the transfer of functions of settlement of electoral disputes from the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Now that function will be done by an independent tribunal that will be assigned by Parliament. So Article 88 of the Constitution, which the bill intends to amend, says the IEBC is responsible for the settlement of electoral disputes, including disputes relating to or arising from nominations, but excluding election petitions and disputes subsequent to the declaration of electoral results. So that function, if this bill indeed goes through, will be taken from the IEBC. It will be handed over to an independent tribunal. Let's now look at another proposal that the Chepkonga-led committee is proposing, this time touching on election petition. So they're proposing to extend the period for the determination of the presidential petition from 14 days to 30 days, an additional 16 days there. And this, of course, will give the Supreme Court sufficient time to not only declare a verdict, but to deliver the reasons for the decision along with the verdict. Article 140, of course, which this bill now seeks to amend, says within 14 days after the filing of a petition under Clause 1, subsection A, the Supreme Court shall hear and determine the petition and its decision shall be final. So the days to hear a petition have been moved from 14 days to 30 days, an additional 16 days. So there's an independent poll that has been conducted today. That poll has been conducted by Ipsos Synovate in the country on touching, of course, on the IEBC protests that have been carried out by CORD in the last couple of days. It has been a process, remember. CORD has been calling for IEBC reforms. They have called for a dialogue. At some point, there was talk of conversation, negotiation between the CORD leadership and, of course, the executive. That has been refuted in the past few days. So Ipsos focused on the protest. How many people know what is going on and how many approve? So the first question they asked, if do you think voters have enough confidence in IEBC to manage the next general election? 41% of those polled think they have enough confidence on IEBC to manage the next general election. 41%. So in other words, 59% have no confidence in the IEBC and its mandate and indeed its ability to manage the next general election. So Central Kenya at 58%, Coast at 29%, Eastern at 39%. Of course, looking at the numbers that have been released by Ipsos Synovate, looking at the protests that have been going on in the country in the last couple of days. So there we go. Nairobi 38%, Northeastern 36%, Nyanza 28%, and Rift Valley 56%. Western stands at 19% of those polls. Let's move on to the next board as we focus on that poll that has been released by Ipsos Synovate. So what is the main change that should happen to increase confidence in the IEBC? What exactly would Kenyans want to see change in the IEBC? Remember, there have been calls on IEBC reforms. There are those who are saying the commissioners need to go home. There are those who are opposed to electronic voter registration. So there are all manner of things. So replacement of commissioners. Remember, this has been the rallying call by ODM leaders, the replacement of commissioners, which of course Jubilee has maintained that it has to be within the constitution. So 71% say replacement of commissioners, that should happen for them to have confidence in the IEBC. Convictions in court of corrupt IEBC officials, 12% say if that happens, then they will have confidence in the IEBC. Remember, there have been talk of the integrity of IEBC commissioners and looking at quote-unquote chicken gate allegations that have been out there in the press. So there are those who say party representatives should be among the commissioners. The Chepkonga-led team has actually touched a little bit on this, and they're giving proposals to have actually party representatives among the commissioners that will serve in IEBC. So elimination of technology, 3% say if you eliminate technology, then we will have more confidence in IEBC. Verification of single voter registration, just 1% say if that happens, then they will have confidence in IEBC. Let's look now at reactions to opposition-led demonstrations. Okay, before we get to the reactions, let's look at some of the changes, other changes that Kenyans want. Presence of more international observers, 1%. Other suggestions, 2%. The ones who don't know have no idea, 5%. Okay, so let's look at the reaction to opposition-led demonstrations that have been going on for a couple of weeks now. People have lost their lives, property has been destroyed in the demonstrations. So awareness of the opposition-led demonstrations, 75% of Kenyans are aware of this demonstration that have been led by CORD leaders calling for reforms in the IEBC. Central, 79%. Eastern, 76%. So let's move to the next board. So in other words, Kenyans are aware that these demonstrations are going on. Nairobi, 87%. That's the highest percentage you're witnessing, of course, after Western at 79%. So those are the numbers that have been released by Ipsos Synovet in the last couple of hours. So the percentage of those in support of the demonstrations and the protests by opposition over IEBC, that number stands at 30%. So 30% are in support of the demonstrations and protests by opposition, which means 70% do not support this particular demonstration. So, of course, Interior CS Joseph Kaiseri has spoken about it this evening and prohibiting all protests, unlawful protests in the country. Let's see how this goes. CORD, of course, has rebuffed that, saying this is a right that is guaranteed by the Constitution. Let's see how this goes in the coming days. So let's now focus on a story from Kisumu. And justice for baby Jeremy has been the subject of conversation since yesterday. Many Kenyans angered by the images that showed a child with a gunshot wound on his back sustained at the peak of the anti-IEBC protests in Kisumu. But who is baby Jeremy and why is his story so important? Doctors at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Referral Hospital say his condition is stable. Take a look.
Jeremy Otieno Adongo, the 4-year-old baby class student of Ogango Primary School, seems oblivious to what is happening around him. It's not so much what he's saying, but what he has left shaded in silence that matters. He probably doesn't know that he has been the subject of an important conversation. Justice for Jeremy, sparked by one image of him shot in the back, writhing in pain, and the other of the bullet being removed by medics in Nema Dispensary, Kisumu, Monday, June the 6th. His mother, Scholastica Adongo, a widow, recounts the events of that day, what transpired in their Kasule home at the outskirts of Kisumu.
Nilikuwa nalala. Nikasikia kitu imechapa mabati mara moja na mtoto ndio nimesikia amelia kwa kiti na sauti. Sasa nimekimbia haraka kwenda kumwangalia. Nikapata hiyo bullet nyuma yake hapo.
Baby Jeremy was not in school, just like many other school children in Kisumu kept away, anticipating the worst in the riots. He was later referred to the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Referral Hospital for further treatment. Doctors in the facility now say his condition is stable, but it will take at least 2 more days to reach a final conclusion.
Mimi nataka tu usaidizi kwa sababu mimi ndio mama na mimi ndio baba.
Baby Jeremy has become the poster child for the cost of the demonstrations and the evident blind nature of lethal force. Kenyans on various platforms are angry and are demanding justice, that someone be held to account. The logic of a stray bullet has been fronted, but different quarters argue that bullets don't fire themselves. And target shooting by the police should always be a trained response. Justice for Jeremy is not just justice for him, but for all the school children, people injured, and those who pay the ultimate price for a cause which some know nothing about. Dorcas Wangira, KTN News.
So the deep-seated supremacy battle between Chief Justice Willie Mutunga and his deputy Kalpana Rawal played out openly today at the Supreme Court, where a 5-judge bench is hearing a dispute on retirement age of judges. The advocates representing Rawal and the Judicial Service Commission engaged in a fierce war of words on whether the Chief Justice acted within his powers by fast-tracking the hearing of the case. KTN's Murimi Mwangi now reports.
For the better part of Tuesday morning, the Supreme Court was embroiled in a fierce verbal crossfire. It was all about a directive where Chief Justice Willie Mutunga fast-tracked the hearing of the retirement dispute involving Deputy Chief Justice Kalpana Rawal and suspended Supreme Court Judge Philip Tunoi. Rawal and Tunoi are challenging their retirement at 70. On the 30th of May, Mutunga invoked his administrative authority as the president of the Supreme Court and brought the hearing of the dispute closer by 3 weeks from the initial June 24th hearing date set by Supreme Court Judge Njoki Ndongo.
What the Chief Justice did is unconstitutional, is illegal, and unlawful.
The Chief Justice should be the head of the judiciary. It means he is the real head. He did not stay the order given by my lady Justice Njoki. He just changed the date of the hearing date.
Order that Justice Ndungu made must remain in force. The case has to be heard on 24th of June.
And while Rawal and Tunoi are technically barred from hearing the dispute, the retirement of Mutunga on the 16th of June is set to plunge the Supreme Court into a quorum hitch, as only 4 judges will be available to hear the dispute. To be fully constituted, the Supreme Court must have at least 5 judges on the bench.
And this is to be a lesson to all the other young people who may be made Chief Justice in the future, not to think that they can come around and they take over the power and dictate to other judges what to do.
Suppose someone comes to this court and a single judge declares him the president of the country. Could the Chief Justice wait for the inter-parties hearing, for example, of July 24th or July 25th?
It is important that this court seizes this moment so that the succeeding Chief Justice does not extend this frontier that has been opened by the current Chief Justice.
But a bigger storm awaits the country's top court on Wednesday as the bench hears an application by activist Okia Omutata, who wants the Supreme Court to disqualify itself from hearing the retirement age dispute on account of alleged vested interests among some of the judges on the bench. With only 9 days to the exit of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court is no doubt under intense pressure to speedily dispose of the retirement age stalemate that has now threatened to cause a total paralysis at the country's top court. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
So now, big question tonight on KTN Prime, we're focusing on the IEBC protests that have been witnessed not just in Nairobi, all over the country in the last couple of weeks. And of course, the government through the CS Interior has just banned that. Actually, they have prohibited quote-unquote unlawful protests. So tonight we're asking you, do you support the government's ban on the so-called unlawful protests? Remember, CORD has just replied to that, saying it is a right that is guaranteed by the Constitution. The government has no right to do that. So do you support the government's ban on the so-called unlawful protests? Gigs Yule Moja says, yes, I do support the government. Destruction of property does not amount to peaceful demonstration. Colin Tosundua says, the government has no constitutional mandate to ban the demos, and Article 37 of the Katiba has it all. Jubilee Critic, that's the username, says, I don't support the ban. Court protests are protected by the Constitution and the court. They are legal. Finally, Peter Katera says, the demonstrations must be stopped by the government without any further delay. Some of your feedback on our big question tonight on whether or not you support the government's ban on the so-called unlawful protests. Keep tweeting us at KTN News, at KTN Kenya. Tweet me directly as well at Linda Guto as we sample some of your thoughts on our big question tonight. Let's now take a break. We'll be back with more news for you. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Let's still stay on Supreme Court judges, and the National Intelligence Service has disowned a document that formed part of a report that the Judicial Service Commission heavily relied on to indict Supreme Court Judge Justice Philip Tunoi. The NIS, as a response to a request by Tunoi's defense, dismissed a document that formed the basis upon which the formation of the Tunoi Tribunal was based.
For JSC, I'll tell you.
The authenticity of a so-called classified document presented to the tribunal last week would form the basis upon which Tuesday's session would commence. The National Intelligence Service had been asked by lead counsel to the tribunal, Paul Nyamodi, to indicate whether a document presented before the judiciary's ombudsman had indeed originated from the spy agency. The document, allegedly highlighting evidence of frequent contact between Geoffrey Kiplagat, the whistleblower in the case, and Supreme Court Judge Justice Philip Tunoi. NIS insisting that no such document came from them.
This is the document that was the center of our challenge and which now NIS say did not emanate from them.
Kennedy Bidali, the ombudsman to the judiciary, appearing once again before the tribunal, would be at pains to explain why his office took up the matter of initiating investigations into Justice Philip Tunoi's conduct as opposed to the Judicial Service Commission.
This process that was initiated by you, internal process, it ends when?
It ends on 26th January 2016.
Very good.
Our internal processes.
What do you do on 26th? You give a report to the Chief Justice.
Yes.
After that report, you appear before a select committee of JSC.
Correct.
Up to there, could we conclude by saying that is the initial process internally initiated by you?
In the ombudsperson's office?
As ombudsperson.
Yes.
According to Tunoi's defense lawyer Fred Ngatia, Article 168 of the Constitution of Kenya indicates that the removal of a court judge ought to be initiated by the Judicial Service Commission as opposed to the Ombudsman's office.
I thought a minute ago you told me you are the investigator requested by the Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga.
Yes.
Do you want to change that process?
No, I am not changing the process, and that's why I'm telling you. It is impossible to answer that on a yes or no basis.
Is this affidavit addressed to JSC? Yes or no?
Like all affidavits, it's sworn under the oaths and such.
I am not interested in other affidavits. Is this affidavit addressed to JSC? Yes or no?
It has no addressee. It's not addressed.
It's not addressed.
JSC.
So I have first and foremost a constitutional difficulty understanding you, the Chief Justice and JSC, because you embraced a process that has no business with you.
Bidali's testimony would also undergo sharp criticism by the defense, who poked holes in the manner in which investigations by his office were conducted.
You are just being very reckless, just dropping accusations against your very senior judge. Why not make the most rudimentary effort of trying to find out?
We did.
Did you ascertain?
I
did you ascertain whether he bought the land?
Personally, no, Chair. As I said, in the course of processing, there are many issues that were beyond our mandate.
By the time you're giving this evidence, had you ascertained whether that is true or not true?
I had asked the other state agencies to do that, to make that follow-up, and their reports had not come back to me.
So the Sharad Rao-led tribunal will once again be seeking to hear from Kennedy Bidali in his two roles in this matter. First, as the ombudsman to the judiciary, and secondly, as the chief magistrate at the Milimani Law Courts, with Tunoi's defense team insisting that according to the constitution, a chief magistrate from a lower court cannot initiate investigations against a judge sitting at a superior court. Timothy Otieno, KTN News.
Kenya's First Lady Margaret Kenyatta handed over the 41st mobile clinic to Vihiga County in the ongoing Beyond Zero campaign. The campaign aims to reduce infant and maternal deaths in all the 47 counties by ensuring easy access to healthcare for expectant mothers. She congratulated the county government of Vihiga for the establishment of the County Medical Training College, the upgrades that are happening at 6 health facilities in 5 sub-counties.
Vijana hawa sio mwingine Mheshimiwa Mama wa Taifa, mkurugenzi mkuu wa masuala ya afya.
When the First Lady launched the Beyond Zero initiative, to many, it seemed a long and unwinding road. Majority of residents in the county have since been waiting with expectancy for the day the First Lady will deliver the Beyond Zero mobile clinic. I'm happy today that the dream has come true.
Championing the health of our people is a cause we can all join hands in and
Right, people, there's a new entrant in the banking sector that is coming your way in our business news in just a few minutes. Plus, we'll look at that blackout that affected a good number of you. Let's take a break. We'll be back with the business news.
Thank you for keeping it KTN News. Let's now take a look at business. I'm Joy Doreen Bira. Tanzania's Bank M has announced it will be setting up shop in Kenya should the Central Bank of Kenya agree to license what will be the first foray of a Tanzanian bank into the country. With already several Kenyan banks operating in Uganda and Tanzania and other East African countries, it will be the first time a Tanzanian bank is making foray into the region. Now, Bank M says it will target family-owned businesses in Kenya, a niche which it says has been somewhat neglected. At the recently concluded Bank Africa Awards, Bank M was recognized for its focused corporate and investment bank segment that caters to large local family-owned businesses in Tanzania and which it hopes will help it find footing in Kenya. And Kenya Power is working towards restoring full power supply to Kenyans affected by a blackout earlier today. This after Kenyan-operated Gitaro Hydro Station experienced a technical fault, causing outages for hours. The outage that happened at about 11:30 a.m. affected West Kenya, North Rift, Central Rift, Nyanza, and some parts of Nairobi. In Nairobi, residents of Westlands, the Central Business District, Parklands, and Hurlingham were affected too. Gitaro Hydro Station is among the leading sources of hydropower in Kenya. And away from that, youth unemployment remains a ticking time bomb that could jeopardize accelerated economic growth for the country. This emerged as the World Bank Group held an open day on the eve of Budget Day to discuss what lies ahead for the economy. KTN's Abia Gina reports.
As Kenyans await the budget reading slated for the 8th of June, many will perhaps be keen to hear what plans the government has around tackling the high youth unemployment. With the current youth unemployment pegged at 40%, Kenya's huge youth bulge, if not harnessed, could turn out to be disastrous.
When you have a lot of young people who are not in the active labor market and are not employed, then you have a lot of idle young people. And this contributes to a lot of problems, including potentially the insecurity situations that we are seeing.
With jobs being hard to come by, many young people have had to resort to informal jobs to make ends meet as they contend with the current situation. According to figures from the latest economic survey for 2015, Kenya generated 841,000 new jobs, falling short by almost 200,000 against a target of 1 million per annum.
Seriously, if there's anything I think the World Bank could do more is engagement with youth.
No, we cannot build the future for our youth, but we can build the youth for the future.
The World Bank Group has been running the Kenya Youth Empowerment Project, which has been geared towards giving college graduates internship opportunities to have a taste of the labor market and gain basic skills.
The youth claim that there are no opportunities, but I think it is up to the youth to go out there and look for these opportunities.
This, however, is insignificant to serve the entire unemployed population. Despite a number of interventions to set up revolving funds to dish out loans to the youth, the challenge of absorption has remained a major headache. It will be interesting to see what the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Henry Rotich, has in his briefcase to try and improve the lot of youth economically right across the country. Abiagina, KTN Business.